My name is Queenie, I'm 17, and I live in a small town just outside Florence, Italy, where cobblestone streets wind past sunlit piazzas and the scent of lavender from distant fields drifts gently through the air. Life here moves slowly, yet every corner holds a story, every shadow a secret. I am a student at the Santa Croce Academy of Arts, where my days are filled with literature, sketches, and the hum of youthful ambition. Ever since I was a child, I've battled asthma. Though I've learned to manage it, the flare-ups remain a quiet shadow, always lurking at the edges of my life. On that particular day, in our English literature class, the ordinary rhythm of lectures and note-taking shattered. A nightmare unfolded, one that none of us anticipated, one that would etch itself into my memory forever. It was the day our classroom, usually a place of discussion and ideas, became the unlikely stage for a stand against someone we trusted, Mrs. Giovanna Ricci. She, the teacher we were supposed to look up to, became the center of a conflict that challenged not only our courage but the very sense of fairness we had believed in. This is the story of how my classmates and I united, confronting authority for the first time, and the journey I embarked upon afterward. A journey to seek justice in the aftermath of tragedy, all while navigating the fragile lines between fear, friendship, and the truth. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. The story began in our English literature class at Santa Croce. The room smelled faintly of old paper and chalk dust, its tall windows framing a pale spring sky. I was hunched over my worn copy of Wuthering Heights, tracing the words with my eyes as Heathcliff's torment echoed in my mind. Then, without warning, a tightness gripped my chest. My breaths turned shallow and raspy, like wind scraping through dry reeds. I reached instinctively for my inhaler, fingers trembling, my pulse quickening with panic. Before I could press it to my lips, a sharp hand snatched it away. Mrs. Giovanna Ricci, the substitute teacher, stood over me, her 50 years etched not in softness but in a kind of brittle disdain. Her dark eyes were cold, her mouth a thin slash of authority. "And what exactly do you think you're doing, Queenie?" she asked, her voice like the edge of a knife. I have asthma," I managed to say, my words broken by the wheeze in my throat. She cut me off with a scoff. "Asthma is psychological. In my day, we didn't use such toys to avoid effort." Her tone dripped with contempt, each syllable a dismissal of my fear. With a quick, practiced motion, she confiscated not only my inhaler but also Matteo's, 16, a shy artist whose sketches of Florence's rooftops were the envy of the class, and Sofia's 17, a ballet dancer whose delicate strength inspired all of us. Both of them had been diagnosed with asthma, and both now stared at her in stunned silence, their faces pale. "When I was your age," Mrs. Ricci continued, her voice rising with a strange pride, "my parents made me run 5 miles to cure what they called a fake illness. And now I'll do the same with you." She crossed the room, locked the cabinet where the emergency medical supplies were kept, and slipped the key into the pocket of her wool dress. The soft click of the lock felt louder than the ticking clock on the wall. I felt my chest constrict further. The world around me blurred, edges shimmering. I could hear Matteo coughing quietly and Sofia's breath hitching in short, panicked bursts. Each second dragged, heavy and hot. I knew my window of safety, without the inhaler, was no more than 15 minutes. After that, my airway would close like a fist. Fear clawed up my throat, but beneath it, a spark of anger flickered. This wasn't discipline, it was cruelty. Around me, the other students shifted uneasily, exchanging glances filled with disbelief. Some whispered, others stared at Mrs. Ricci as if seeing her for the first time. In that moment, the classroom ceased to be a sanctuary of learning. It became a cage where our trust was held hostage, along with our breath. I clutched the edge of my desk, gasping softly, my mind racing. 15 minutes. That was all I had before my body betrayed me completely. 15 minutes to act, or to suffocate under the weight of someone else's authority. Climax of that day was more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. Mrs. Ricci yanked the teacher's desk across the classroom with a metallic screech, wedging it firmly in front of the door. She perched on it like a sentinel, her silhouette rigid and unyielding. "No one leaves until you admit you're faking your illnesses," she declared, eyes glinting with a perverse satisfaction that made the air in the room feel heavier. Elena, my best friend and a 17-year-old violinist with a fiery spirit, sprang to her feet, her bow clutched tightly in one hand. "Queenie is not faking." I saw her struggling. Her voice trembled with urgency, yet Mrs. Ricci merely scoffed, a derisive curl of her lips. "She's just seeking attention," she sneered, dismissing every ounce of evidence and empathy. I felt my breath faltering, each inhale a sharp stab, my chest compressed as if invisible hands were squeezing my ribs. Matteo's coughing escalated. His face flushed crimson, while Sofia clutched her chest, gasping in terrified gulps of air. The room seemed to shrink around us, the cobblestone-scented sunlight filtering through the windows, unable to reach the suffocating darkness that was slowly enveloping our spirits. Then came a voice I didn't expect. Lorenzo, my cousin, 18 and a soccer player with a reputation for blunt honesty, leaned back against a desk and spoke coldly. "She's always faking to get attention." Grandma said so. His words cut deeper than any physical blow, and I was too weak, too winded to respond. The sting of betrayal twisted my gut, leaving a hollow ache that made each shallow breath even harder to take. Mrs. Ricci, emboldened by the tension and apparent chaos, threw open the classroom windows. "Fresh air will cure you," she declared, her tone almost triumphant. But what followed next made my heart hammer in sheer disbelief. With a swift movement, she killed the lights, plunging the room into darkness, leaving only the dim glow from the corridor outside. "Now no one can coordinate their lies," she whispered, the sound crawling over the walls like a living thing. A desperate cry broke the stifling silence. "Call 112," shouted Julia, her voice sharp with panic. But Mrs. Ricci lunged, snatching the phone from her hand and threatening suspension for anyone who disobeyed. The hallway light cast long shadows across the room, flickering across pale, panicked faces. In the darkness, Matteo's coughs rang hollow, Sofia's weak gasps mingled with my own labored breathing. Then, almost ritualistically, Mrs. Ricci pulled out a thermos from her bag. She muttered under her breath, "This is the real cure." Her voice, low and fanatical, sent chills down my spine. She approached me, her grip on my shoulder tight and unforgiving, her nails digging into my skin. "Drink. It will help you breathe," she insisted. I tried to resist, my body trembling violently with fear and exhaustion. But in one swift, merciless motion, she tipped the steaming liquid into my mouth. The heat scalded my tongue and throat immediately. Pungent aroma of peppermint and eucalyptus was overpowering, thick and almost choking. I coughed violently, gagging, sputtering as the burning liquid clawed its way down my throat. Later, medical tests confirmed what we had feared. The mixture was a concentrated blend of peppermint and eucalyptus oils, so potent it could cause serious lung injury. In that instant, I felt the sharp, bitter taste of betrayal, the excruciating sting of physical pain, and the suffocating weight of helplessness all at once. My classmates' faces swam in the dim corridor light, each expression a mix of horror, fear, and disbelief. We were trapped in a nightmare, our sanctuary turned into a crucible of cruelty and abuse. Every breath I managed felt like a battle, each gasp a silent scream for help that went unheard. Elena's violin bow clattered to the floor as she lunged toward me, but Mrs. Ricci's shadow loomed, unyielding and monstrous. Tejeo's coughing was ragged, Sofia's chest heaving, and Lorenzo's betrayal echoed in my ears. In that darkened room, suffused with the smell of peppermint and fear, time seemed to stretch endlessly, each second a lifetime. I realized, through the haze of panic and pain, that this day had become a test, not only of our physical endurance but of our unity, courage, and resolve. Mrs. Ricci had taken everything she could, but she hadn't counted on the resilience of those who refused to be silenced. The first crack in her control had to come from us. And somehow, somewhere, I knew we would find a way. The attack of my asthma escalated violently. My chest constricted as if an invisible vice squeezed tighter with every breath. I collapsed onto the floor, coughing so violently that blood began to streak from my mouth. Matteo, beside me, was also gasping, blood mingling with his tears and saliva, while Sofia lay nearly unconscious, her breath rasping like a stranded fish flopping helplessly. Classroom erupted into chaos. Students screamed, some frozen with terror, others flailing as adrenaline surged through their veins. Elena dropped to her knees beside me, clutching my shoulders, trying to lift me upright. Her eyes were wide with panic, her hands trembling, but her presence was a lifeline amidst the madness. "Queenie, stay with me," she cried. Marco, a fiery boy known for his defiance, slammed his fists on the desk. "She's gone insane," he shouted, voice echoing against the walls. But Mrs. Ricci only smirked, her voice dripping with malice. "Silence, or the entire class will be suspended for 2 weeks." Her threat cut through the panic like a blade, freezing a few of the younger students in place. Suddenly, a glimmer of hope appeared. Alessandro, my boyfriend and an 18-year-old architecture student, had been passing the hallway when he heard the commotion. He pressed himself against the window, eyes widening in horror as he saw me convulsing on the floor. Adrenaline surged, and he pounded on the door with his fists, leaving streaks of blood where his nails scratched the wood. But the door wouldn't budge. With consciousness slipping, I grasped at the thick copy of Wuthering Heights lying near me. Summoning the last of my strength, I hurled it at the ceiling-mounted fire sprinkler. The glass shattered with a sharp crack, water spraying down in torrents. Classroom was instantly drenched, students shrieking as the icy deluge cascaded over us. The sprinklers triggered the fire alarm. The shrill ringing reverberated like a warning through the hall. Mrs. Ricci slipped on the wet floor, her balance lost, and the key to the medicine cabinet tumbled from her pocket. In that moment, Alessandro and several teachers burst through the now unlocked door, rushing toward us with a mix of panic and authority. Emergency responders arrived, but it was tragically too late for Matteo. He collapsed in the hallway, lifeless, the color drained from his face as we looked on, helpless and broken. I was resuscitated after 90 agonizing seconds without breath, my lungs screaming in pain and my throat raw from the trauma. Sofia survived, but the ordeal left her with a permanent deficit, 30% of her lung capacity gone, requiring long-term medical treatment. Classroom, soaked and reeling from terror, became a stark monument to what cruelty and negligence could yield. Around me, students huddled together, some weeping silently, some shaking, and all forever marked by the tragedy we had endured. Even in survival, the scars were undeniable. Pain, guilt, and sorrow intertwined in the air, making each breath a reminder of what had been lost and what we had endured. But amidst the devastation, there was a flicker of resilience, the knowledge that, even in the darkest moments, action and courage could make the difference between life and death. The aftermath of that day was a storm that no one could ignore, yet the school tried to bury it under polite euphemisms. Mrs. Ricci was placed on paid leave, officially described as a mere incident, a term so sterile it failed to capture the horror she had inflicted. Administrators, eager to protect the institution's reputation, attempted to silence me with an offer of 50,000 euros to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I refused, my conscience and the memory of Matteo's lifeless eyes refusing to be bought. Elena, Marco, and Davide, a 17-year-old hacker with a sharp mind and a penchant for uncovering digital secrets, joined me in gathering evidence. We combed through Mrs. Ricci's old blog posts, uncovering entries where she mocked students with chronic illnesses, laughing at their struggles as if they were performances for attention. We pulled system logs from the classroom's automated controls, confirming she had deliberately cut the lights. Marco had recorded her voice on his phone. "No one leaves until you admit you're faking your illnesses." Each piece of evidence was a shard of truth piercing the school's attempts at cover-up. But our fight for justice wasn't straightforward. The school responded with threats, suspension for the class, letters from the teachers' union warning that accusations against an educator could constitute defamation. The opposition was subtle but heavy-handed, a psychological tactic meant to wear down our resolve. The battle became even more personal. Lorenzo, my cousin, posted a video of me struggling through an asthma attack at a family gathering, with a caption implying I had faked my condition for attention. The clip spread rapidly, accompanied by vicious comments from people who had never known the truth. Alessandro, who had initially stood by me, began to distance himself, influenced by his basketball coach's warnings that involvement in the scandal could jeopardize his college opportunities. The isolation was suffocating, but it only strengthened my determination. We reached out to Bianca Rossi, a lawyer known for her integrity and compassion, who agreed to represent us pro bono. Bianca guided us meticulously, gathering eyewitness statements, compiling medical reports, and documenting the dangerous mixture of peppermint and eucalyptus oil that had been forced into my mouth. Each document, each testimony became a weapon in our fight against both Mrs. Ricci and the institution that sought to protect her. A nurse who had treated her students in a previous school confirmed a history of complaints against Mrs. Ricci for denying students access to necessary medication. Instead of facing accountability, she had been quietly transferred elsewhere, a pattern of negligence and evasion that revealed systemic failure. This revelation fueled our resolve. The incident in our classroom was not an isolated cruelty but part of a broader pattern of abuse. Despite threats, social media attacks, and the growing isolation from some peers, we pressed on. Every piece of evidence collected, every witness statement, every corroborating report strengthened our case and reminded us why silence was never an option. It was not just about personal justice. It was about ensuring no other student would face the terror and danger we had endured. The fight was far from over, but for the first time since that catastrophic day, I felt a surge of control, a sense that our truth, painstakingly documented, could finally be heard. In the shadows of betrayal, fear, and grief, courage began to take root. One night, Davide, ever vigilant with his hacker's intuition, discovered an anonymous account circulating my medical records online. The violation of privacy was blatant and illegal, yet the account had already garnered attention, the numbers of viewers climbing steadily with each passing hour. My heart sank as I realized just how far the ordeal had spread beyond the walls of our classroom. Determined to reclaim my narrative, I grabbed my camera and filmed myself recounting every detail of what had happened: the asthma attacks, Matteo's tragic death, Sofia's injuries, and Mrs. Ricci's deliberate cruelty. My voice wavered, but I spoke the truth with unflinching honesty. Once uploaded, the video went viral, igniting a storm of public outrage. Soon, journalists arrived at our small town, and one, Giovanni Conti, took particular interest. His investigative report uncovered that Mrs. Ricci was part of a conservative network of teachers who had attended seminars in Milan focused on what they called combating victim culture. Reading her old blog posts made my skin crawl. She had written about deliberately endangering students to teach them lessons, framing her actions as educational rather than malicious. The chilling realization settled in. Her actions were not mere incompetence, they were a calculated exercise of cruelty. Tension escalated when a mysterious USB appeared in my locker. Contained within were high-resolution videos of our classroom hallway, capturing Mrs. Ricci standing by as we struggled, completely inert. Bianca Rossi, our lawyer, confirmed the USB was critical evidence. She warned me to keep it confidential, stressing that releasing it prematurely could jeopardize the legal case. The footage was undeniable. Every gasp, every convulsion, every terrified glance caught on camera. For the first time, the extent of her apathy, bordering on deliberate endangerment, was irrefutably documented. Around the same time, I unearthed further evidence of Mrs. Ricci's history of reckless and dangerous conduct. At a previous school, she had pressured a student with type 1 diabetes to drink herbal tea instead of taking insulin, resulting in the child being hospitalized. Similar incidents had occurred in 3 other schools, but she had always been shielded by union protections. Her consistent pattern of endangering vulnerable students was a glaring indication that this was systemic negligence, if not outright malice. Armed with the USB, blog archives, medical reports, and witness testimonies, we decided it was time to escalate our resistance. We organized a silent protest on the school grounds, holding candles to honor Matteo's memory. Despite a direct order from Principal Signora Moretti forbidding gatherings, dozens of students joined, their collective presence a powerful statement of defiance. Though we were punished with detention after classes, our resolve remained unshaken. Protest, combined with the online outrage, attracted media attention, placing immense pressure on local authorities. Eventually, the police opened an official investigation, calling 20 students as witnesses to the events in our classroom. The legal battle was slow and frustrating. Court demanded that Mrs. Ricci complete an emergency medical training program, a basic requirement she had flagrantly neglected. However, the tribunal declined to dismiss her immediately, citing procedural rules and due process. It was infuriating, yet the court's acknowledgement of the severity of her neglect was a small, critical step toward justice. In the meantime, the district established a €200,000 memorial fund in Matteo's name, dedicated to asthma research. His name, once a source of grief, became a beacon for prevention and education. The mounting stress of the legal proceedings took a toll on me physically. My asthma worsened under the strain, forcing me to increase my medication. The psychological weight also fractured my relationship with Alessandro. Though he had initially supported me, the cautionary advice from his basketball coach about jeopardizing college opportunities created distance, and eventually we drifted apart. It was another lesson in resilience, the understanding that even allies could falter under pressure, and one must stand firm, even alone. Refusing to let the trauma define us, I formed a student advocacy group focused on patients' rights within the school. Initially, 30 students joined, each motivated by our shared experience and desire to prevent future harm. We conducted research, drafted proposals, and organized meetings with faculty to present our case for improved medical support policies. Our proposals included clear guidelines for emergency care, guaranteed access to personal medication, and structured training for teachers on handling health crises. Standing before the school board, articulating our recommendations with clarity and passion, I felt a profound shift within myself. From victim to advocate, from frightened student to a young woman determined to reshape the culture around her. Our efforts gradually bore fruit. Administrators began to implement policies ensuring medical emergencies were taken seriously. Bianca continued to guide us, negotiating the nuances of legal accountability while safeguarding the students involved. Mrs. Ricci ultimately resigned, and her teaching license was formally reviewed, a symbolic yet vital acknowledgement of accountability. The victories were tempered by grief and fatigue, but they represented tangible progress, a movement from chaos and terror towards safety and awareness. The ordeal, while harrowing, revealed profound truths. I learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the persistence in the face of it. I realized that collective action could disrupt entrenched systems, that truth documented meticulously could prevail even against powerful institutions. And perhaps most poignantly, I understood the importance of bearing witness. Matteo's life, Sofia's injuries, my own near-death experience. They were not only personal tragedies but also catalysts for systemic change. Through advocacy, legal strategy, and unwavering resolve, we transformed our suffering into a force for protection and prevention. As the dust settled, our advocacy group became a permanent fixture at Santa Croce, continuing to monitor the well-being of students, educate peers and staff, and provide a safe space for those at risk. Our silent protest evolved into ongoing dialogue, workshops, and peer mentorship, cultivating a culture that valued empathy, vigilance, and accountability. While Matteo could never be brought back, his memory became a guiding light, a reminder of why we fought and why we could never remain silent again. In the end, the incident that began as terror and cruelty had sparked a revolution of awareness and protection. I, Queenie, 17 years old, once suffocating under the shadow of fear, had emerged with a voice strong enough to demand change, to confront injustice, and to ensure that no other student would suffer as we had. The journey was painful, fraught with loss, betrayal, and fear, yet it revealed the unshakable truth. Even in darkness, action, courage, and unity could ignite hope and transform lives. A quiet Sunday morning wrapped the small cemetery in a soft golden light. I walked up the narrow path to Matteo's grave, my steps hesitant, each footfall a reminder of loss that had never fully left me. Beside me, his mother, Isabella, moved with a fragile grace, her hands folded in her lap. We sat together in silence, the world around us fading into the background, leaving only the engraved words on his headstone, "Light endures forever." The stone was cold beneath my fingers, yet the sentiment carried warmth, a promise that even in death, the essence of Matteo's life could continue to illuminate the lives of others. I had spent months pouring my thoughts into words, writing a feature for the local newspaper. The article called for systemic reform in schools, advocating for protocols that protected students' health and well-being, emphasizing that no child should ever face what we had endured. The act of writing felt like reclaiming a part of myself, a channel for grief transformed into action. Matteo would never walk these halls again, never laugh with classmates, never reach for the stars he so dearly loved, but through words and advocacy, his legacy could persist, shaping the environment for those who followed. Reflecting on everything, I realized the journey had taught me lessons that went far beyond the classroom walls, lessons about courage, empathy, and the power of persistent action. Lesson 1: Courage is the first step toward change. I had learned that fear is natural, but letting it dictate your actions gives cruelty room to thrive. It took standing up to a powerful authority figure, even when my body and mind screamed to retreat, to begin creating meaningful change. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it, and it was that courage which sparked a movement within our school community. Lesson 2: Solidarity amplifies voices. Alone, my pleas might have been drowned in bureaucracy and indifference. But Elena, Marco, Davide, Sofia, and even those hesitant peers formed a network of support that made our resistance undeniable. Shared courage becomes contagious. Collective action can disrupt entrenched systems that seem immovable. In truth, the battle was never just mine. It was ours together, and that unity shaped the path to justice. Lesson 3: Document truth meticulously. Evidence matters. Every photo, blog post, system log, and video recording became a tangible manifestation of reality, an unassailable record that could withstand scrutiny. Truth, when carefully documented, becomes a shield against deceit and manipulation. In a world where denial and cover-ups are powerful, preserving evidence is an act of both protection and empowerment. Lesson 4: Transformation comes through action, not passivity. Mourning alone is insufficient. Grief must be channeled. I transformed my personal trauma into advocacy, into proposals for medical support policies, into organized initiatives that educated and protected students. Action transforms helplessness into purpose, fear into influence. Our silent protests, our policy suggestions, and our legal documentation created ripples that reached far beyond the classroom. Lesson 5: Healing is intertwined with responsibility. Pain does not vanish, but it can be integrated into meaningful work. I carried the weight of Matteo's loss, my own injuries, and the fractured friendships, yet I learned that embracing responsibility, fighting for justice, mentoring peers, advocating for systemic change, gave that pain direction. Healing is not forgetting. It is choosing to wield your experience to prevent others from suffering. As I left the cemetery, Isabella's hand briefly squeezed mine. Her gaze was a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. "He would be proud of what you've done," she whispered. And in that moment, I felt the profound truth of our efforts. While we could not bring Matteo back, we had honored his life by creating a world in which fewer students would face the dangers he and we had endured. Back at school, our advocacy group continued to grow. Policies were adopted, teachers received mandatory medical emergency training, and students felt empowered to speak up without fear of dismissal or ridicule. The memory of Matteo remained the guiding light, a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage, multiplied by community, could shape the culture of an entire institution. I also realized the importance of sharing these experiences, not merely as stories of suffering, but as lessons in resilience, action, and compassion. Through telling our story, we inspired other students, families, and educators to reevaluate the systems around them, to ensure that no child's health or dignity would be compromised for the sake of indifference or outdated tradition. And so, my journey continues, not as someone defined by tragedy, but as a young advocate committed to systemic change, mindful of both the fragility and resilience of life. Matteo's legacy, Sofia's courage, and the bonds of friendship forged in adversity remind me daily that even in darkness, light endures. If you've been moved by our story, remember, courage begins with one voice, solidarity amplifies it, and action ensures it creates real change. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel to continue following stories of resilience and advocacy. Together, we can honor those we've lost, protect those still here, and ensure that no voice goes unheard.